Officer for CASBO. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today with me is Sarah. Sarah is our Chief Governmental Relations Officer, and also joining us today is Sarah Slater, CASBO's Facility Professional Council Chair, and Sarah's also the Assistant Director of Fiscal Services from Long Defied. So we have the two Sarahs, the power team, with us this afternoon. So let me just start by sort of framing up with you and hearing from you today. Really because of the tremendous work and quality of work from our legislative committee here at CASBO, as well as our member leader. A number of really important conversations taking place around returning to schools, and I just want to share a couple of those with you. One is with the management associations, really on a AXA, the Small School Districts Association, CSESA, and ourselves. And the management associations are coming together with one very unified purpose, and that is that we are informing our policymakers to, in turn, have them make better decisions about some of the criteria for returning to schools. We really feel strongly as a unified group that we don't want the tail to be wagging the dog, and we don't want broad statements made that really have no basis in reality. And so our role is to bring forward, from your perspective, the realities of what it's going to take to move forward. So that's one group. The second is with the governor's office. We were actually on a nightly call that's eased up a little bit with Ben Cheetah, the Chief Deputy Cabinet Secretary. And again, the purpose the same. He was sharing with us executive orders that were about to be announced. We were able to participate in helping shape and often reshape and reframe some of those executive orders because they were then better informed with the information that we were bringing to the table from our members. And then finally, Tony Thurman, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, has brought a very large group together. And as you might imagine, when you have, 30 entities, all of the unions are participating, the management groups are participating, CDE, as they're starting to move a task force or series of task forces, again, on reopening schools, we have found ourselves in the situation across all of these calls that, aside from the student safety and the learning of the students, every single discussion involves the work of our members. How are transportation services going to be provided, child nutrition, and we'll talk about those in a moment. So really, our intent is to hear directly from you, and if we want to go to that next slide, to hear from you some of the options that you're exploring. There are, of course, varying models. We know with 1,100 school districts, nothing is going to look exactly the same in terms of how schools reopen. But, what kind of models are you exploring? Some that we hear are maybe a Monday, Wednesday group of students, a Tuesday, Thursday group. We have staggered school times and schedules. We're hearing from, some of our education systems in Europe around opening the younger grades first and then moving to older grades. So there's a whole variety, but with each model or each option, there are these considerations that you see on the slide in front of you. What we're doing at CASBO is to have conversations with each one of these groups, and we started last week and continue through, really with the intent of gathering information. Certainly, as Sarah has information available and conversations that she's been through, we'll be sharing that back out. But what we find in most cases, and a huge disclaimer, we don't have the answers. Our intent is to find those answers, to analyze the information that you have coming in, and again, inform our policymakers, and then secondly, share back with you some of what we're learning in all of these conversations. So these are kind of the areas that we're exploring to get some really key questions asked. And again, we'll share with you what we're finding as we go. Next slide. The information as it's being gathered is really being organized into 3 buckets. Based on these questions that we have and the conversations we're having, what does policy and funding need to look like? I think that is across any discipline. Policy and funding changes are absolutely necessary if we're going to return in the new environment that is still taking shape. What does that look like? The conditions of learning, and then leadership and planning as we move forward, not just in the reopening of schools, but for the time thereafter. And certainly, again, as mentioned, purpose and goals, advocating for funding, legislative and regulatory areas that we need relief and flexibility in. And Sarah's going to cover some of those funding models and also going to talk about some of the waivers that we are requesting in terms of relief for our members. So we encourage you to be very open in the questions that you have, again, with the caveat that we don't have the answers, but we're committed to finding answers and using this information to better inform the decisions that are being made by our here at our Capitol. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Sarah Slater.
Hi, hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So I just wanted to talk to you about some of the struggles and some things that happened initially, and then currently where we're at and what we are kind of doing for the future. So initially, the first thing that we were looking at was, okay, how many hotspots do we need for our students who don't have the access for internet at home? So luckily, we were fortunate to put through quite a bit of order beforehand to have that ready and available for our students. So we were prepared for that. And then the other endeavor, like most of you, was shooting Chromebooks, getting those out to students. But it's not so easy. We have to package it correctly. And so the logistics of that was quite a task. And so we did drive-through drop-offs and pickups of different items that students needed. The other concern was, I'm sorry, I have a little dog running around. The challenges of what our IT department is experiencing. Okay, we have them signed out, but how many will we really get back? What will be our loss prevention for that? Do we have the capacity of covering those costs for that? And then another huge thing was feeding students. Again, logistics. I will have to say for Long Beach Unified, our food service department really did do a great job. It was quite seamless. They worked with our facilities teams to make sure that the sites that they were choosing were not construction sites that we were anticipating or kitchens that we needed to be remodeled. So there was quite a lot of discussions and it was very seamless in regards to that. And then currently, custodial time looks different, right? The cleaning patterns are different. Since we have students not at schools, we did some deep cleaning in some of our classrooms, and we put signage up on doors that we deep cleaned. So that way, if anybody is coming in and using that classroom, we know that we need to go back and clean it. The deep cleaning of doorknobs, surfaces, they were made more frequently. I'm still having to go into facilities a couple days a week at work, and I see our custodial teams cleaning the doorknobs quite regularly. We sent out to all of we do lease back. We send out a contractor letter to all of our lease back contractors, and there was information in regards to social distancing protocols. They had to sign in and return it back to us. We did board resolutions to include identification of necessary projects that our construction projects were essential, and that went to board. We did also have bearer badges. Our construction workers have this letter that they have in their car in case they were ever got pulled over, as to why they were on the streets. It tells them that they were on a construction site at a particular place. That hasn't been something that our construction teams have needed. Like that hasn't happened. But we didn't know this in the beginning, so we were really trying to prepare to make sure that our construction teams had the necessary tools that they had. Um, we're looking at the FEMA applications, as most of you, it's quite a task making sure that we have the appropriate documentations for when we do go apply. And one of the struggles that we've had with our internal health department with Long Beach was we are not notified till like the day before that our school sites are going to be at COVID testing sites. So when we were notified, they picked a school that was heavy under construction, and we had to make sure that there was proper barriers in place, that were the drive-through testing that was coming through was not in the way of any of the construction products that were getting onto campuses. So that was a definite struggle. And it continues to be a struggle. So they first told us, well, hey, we're going to use Jordan High School as a drive-up testing site. A couple weeks later, we were told, okay, it's not only going to be a drive-up testing site, we are now going to accept walk-ins. Well, walk-ins on a construction site, is not the best scenario. But we worked with the fire department to make sure that the place was secure. But there was some anxiety, of course, on the construction side of having to work construction worker at a place where they're doing COVID testing sites. So that was very challenging. Um, the other thing is, so our director has been going out to job sites just to make sure that proper protective equipment is being used, that social distancing is happening, that there's signage on the COVID protocols that we have district in place, that the bathrooms are being cleaned. So that's been something that he's been also just tackling and putting it in his time to go do. For me, in accounting, we're very fortunate that we have a bond accounting software that works through the web. So we've been really been able to do a lot of things at home and remotely. We have platforms. We're looking into improve those platforms with our invoices and requisition to streamline that. So with the bad also does come good, of streamlining profit processes and looking at your internal procedures to see how can you improve, how can you become more efficient. Um, and then currently for the future, we're looking at the capacity per square footage per student to even see what is the ratio. Can we spread those kids across the campuses, across the district? We have over 80 sites of elementary, middle, and high school. And right now, we're about 50-50 capacities as we're doing this exercise to try and see, can we spread those kids out? Um, as a facilities person, we would love to get a jump start on summer projects, but that takes packing up teachers. And currently, we had union negotiations with our teachers union on what we would pay teacher, how many hours, who's to come in to pack at the end of the school year when the schools ended. So now that this has happened, we've been in contact with our teachers union and classified unions to see what that looked like. Can we pack them up early, um, but have social distancing protocols in place, bringing some of the teachers back to pack their classrooms. Also, we're looking at, okay, we're going to pay them in an additional stipend for doing this because they're also doing their distant learning. So having those conversations right now as we speak, and we'll be having a letter out to our different folks who are going to be impacted by that. But with that too also comes, okay, that's the teacher's stuff that we're normally used to. What we're not used to is student items. And so who's going to pack that up? Will the teacher then pack it up, put their name on the bag, and place it in a box for the parent to pick up? We're working out logistics of that. What if we find paraphernalia that you're not supposed to find in a locker room? Like, what does that look like? And 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 what do we do at those point in times? And as has been discussed earlier, we don't have everything worked out. It's been a lot of conversations and trying to work through these problems. Um, there's been an anxiousness in regards to the teachers and classified unions about, okay, if we are coming back to school, do we have enough hand sanitizer? What does the classroom look like? What type of extra supplies are we going to leave for a teacher to make sure that they wipe certain things down? Can we get that product in time for when schools open? Um, we've also been getting requests since street sweeping um, is going to be coming back up in some of our more dense populated areas. Some of the community is asked to use our parking lots as parking, and we've had to turn a couple down because they're in. We have some construction plan for those particular sites, so we did not allow those ones. But we're looking into where we can do that, and working with the mayor and the city in regards to that. Um, and then the lastly is that I have on my list is uh, plexiglass for areas that have high concentrated traffic, like the secretary's desk, the cafeterias, putting plexiglass up, and then also putting signage on the ground 6 feet apart to keep students, if they're going through those areas, or parents coming to the counter, to to protect the staff within those areas. That's about what I have currently.
Thank you
Lot.
so yes, no, and thank you so much, Sarah Slater. Our goal in having your perspective is hopefully it allows an opportunity for those in attendance of today's event to think about questions that they have and really allow for a genuine discussion. Our goal, as we've mentioned, is really to be here and provide your perspective in these conversations. So let me go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Sarah Boches. I'm your lead advocate. As you know, last Tuesday, Governor Newsom announced that he had created a 4-point roadmap to reopening the economy and education. Schools and childcare centers, we're under stage 2, which would require the state to have enough supplies, testing, and an array of requirements prior to that to beginning the process of reopening schools. And so, as Tasha mentioned, we are part of the state's task force on reopening schools. And in one of those components, we're also part of the PPE task force of ensuring that we have access to those supplies. And this is an ongoing conversation we've had in the last 3 weeks, is making sure that we are part of any of the large state purchases to ensure that schools have access to masks, gloves, cleaning supplies. We have been in conversations with Cal OES, the California Office of Emergency Services, that's responsible for the large purchases on behalf of the state. What we've been informed is that school districts can reach out to their county emergency services in counties and seek an opportunity to purchase through them for any of these supplies, because through those county emergency services, they're rolling out what the state has purchased under Cal OES. And so those are conversations that we're having and flagging that it is important to ensure that if we are to reopen physically or in a hybrid model, that we really do take into account health and safety first. And then secondary, the budget. How do we ensure that this is logistically possible? So the outcomes that CASBO is seeking is that we want to make sure that we are in coordination in getting the waivers, federal requirement changes, and laws that need to be amended during this emergency at the federal level, at the state level, and then ensuring that that local guidance and partnership is coordinated. The last thing we want to do is create an additional layer of problems that prevents you from doing your task. For CASBA, our goal is to ensure that we mitigate the fiscal impact on our LEAs given the loss of ADA, and really think about an alternative to reporting our attendance in the event that we end up in a hybrid model or go back to distance learning. We have to recognize that to a reporting requirement that makes it difficult to ascertain. And so that's something that we are discussing with legislators, an opportunity to really reconsider how we record attendance that enables us to recognize that we're doing a combination of how we provide educational services. And then create a roadmap to reopening, a roadmap that allows for sharing of best practices that helps and facilitates the needs of our small school districts, our rural and urbans. And so with that, we wanted to open the conversation to those on a webinar. You could either raise your hand through the raise your hand icon and sign up to speak, and Christina will call on you, or you're welcome to submit your question in writing and she could articulate it if you don't feel comfortable speaking. But our goal in this webinar is really to support you to find, to seek that information that is necessary to get the clarification needed. Our goal is really to identify what are those areas that need to be recognized, need to be addressed, and that we need to strive to resolve in any conversation in setting out that roadmap to reopening schools. With that, I'll ask Christina if anyone has gone ahead to raise the hand icon and give you an opportunity to type in your questions.
Thank you both so much. This is Christina. I do have one question on the floor from Tina Douglas. Tina, if you'd like to speak, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon again. So Sarah, we did reach out to our local county emergency services to ask about accessing some of those agreements for the PPE equipment that we need, and told them that prices through our vendors had been tripling for some of the items. And they told us that we should work with our vendors directly. We even reached out to our county office of education to see if they had a direct contact, and they weren't aware. So some of the information that you guys are getting is not really translating down to us at the local level.
Thank you. As I had mentioned in the child nutrition webinar an hour earlier, we're having a second round of conversations on this topic on Friday with CDE. So I'll go ahead and send them an email and let them know that the statewide Cal LEAs has to send that signal to each of their counties if this is the guidance that we have been instructed. So thank you so much for following up with me, Tina.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Sarah. I have a question on the floor from Ryan Kilby.
Hi, thank you very much. This might be a bit of a silly question, but we just webinar after webinar about just speculation about what is going to occur. But what is most concerning to me is, and if you guys have heard any comments as to how, with all of the discussion on the cuts in funding, but yet all of the discussion on operating schools in a fashion that is going to cost a lot more money. So how is that delta of extensive increased costs going to match up with cuts in funding? Has anybody that you've heard from had any input as to how that is going to be managed?
So this is something that we definitely brought up during the beginning of the task force conversation. We're also setting up a meeting with Mike Fine from Figment. As you've seen, and if you haven't, I'm more than happy to send you information from Figment that they've released that yes, we need to prepare for drastic reductions. And so this has been where one hand is not speaking to the other. The reason for this input is that legislators and the administration do not do your jobs. They're not in the grind of things, recognizing the realities. Many of them were not aware that once we went into shelter in place, that your child nutrition programs depend on locally attained revenues. And so there's been a massive need to educate our legislators as well as the administration that what are the components that have been disabled in this environment that no longer allow us to persist and will no longer be available should we have to continue to be shelter in place or do a hybrid model. So this is not a silly question. It really is something that Tasha and I, being part of these conversations, is the purpose of our role, is to bring this discussion to reality, that we can't ask for something that is not logistically capable because the resources aren't there, the supplies aren't there, and the staff definitely is not there. And so we believe that it's important to highlight in each of the disciplines all of these concerns and constraints and really recognize that it's going to take a huge lift. And if the state is seeking that direction, then we need to advocate that the funding remain in place and then that it gets supplemented for all the revenue losses in the various programs that generate local resources.
And Ryan, I would just add to that, I guess our hope of optimism is that the governor has been so vocal in his intent to prioritize education that while we will have an effect, certainly in funding, we do anticipate that schools will be considered above many other programs that are out there. But it's no news to anyone that we do not have the revenues coming in because businesses are shut down and the taxes. So I think, not only do we have that significant reduction in revenue at the state level, but we also have that delay in the, sort of the cash flow. And so May 14th is when we'll hear those first, kind of budget insights. But, one of our roles has been to really continue to hit home that one, it's not that any of our management group and discipline feasible to deliver, in a parallel environment, whether, at home and in the classroom. And we have to assume not all parents are going to send their kids back to school. That we have to assume that. So in this blended model, whatever those proportions are, it's not feasible. And so we've done, I think, a good job of moving the conversation from we're resistant to all these new changes to really it's not practical. There's an impossibility to what's being asked. And I think we've hit home and actually seen a few things sort of modify and change in some of the conversation. But again, as Sarah said, it's not a dumb question. We definitely don't have the answers. It's still speculation, really, until the 14th. I think that's when it's going to become reality. And then we will have conversations, and here we go. Everyone will know what they can and should be doing at that particular time.
I have a question on the floor from James McKellis. James, did you want to speak to your question?
Hello? Yeah, I was just wondering, as far as there's been a process developed in getting into cleaning the classrooms or the schools themselves inside and out.
At this time, we haven't seen direction from the Department of Education and Writing. At the end of this slide deck, I am including CDC's guidance for spaces, and it includes direction for schools, but it is a topic that we have brought up to CD in terms of what additional criteria is needed, and why there are some things that will have to be decided at the local level, but we believe that as much as guidance that we could get at the state level that preserves and protects LEAs from liability, from litigation, that's where we see an opportunity that still has not been addressed. And so it's something that we will continue to bring up to ensure that we have that standard and at least best practices in that arena.
Thank you. I have a comment on the floor regarding a guide on how much cleaning or PPE to order per staff member, per student enrollment, or classroom size or site size. It's hard to know how much we will need. We don't want to over or under order, similar to how OES recommends emergency for food supply.
Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you, Sarah. At this time, I have no outstanding questions or comments. The floor is open.
It's Tasha. I do have a question for our participants. We're hearing from other states that they are implementing body temperature checking, whether the student is getting on the bus and or when they are arriving at the facility. And so I'm curious what you all might be hearing or exploring in that area as well. It doesn't sound like there is a lot of conversation taking place on that topic right now. We are investigating that with some of our other state affiliates, and we'll return information to you as that becomes available to us.
Thank you, Tasha. Tina Douglas has a comment on the thermometers topic.
We actually, just in anticipation, because our County Office of Education has been talking about some of the various options, we worked with one of our district nurses and we purchased 2 thermometers per physical location for each of our sites, including the district office, so wherever we have people coming into work. Although we have not had our first reopening committee meeting yet, we just, based on what we're hearing from the county office, wanted to buy it because all of a sudden now thermometers are in high demand like toilet paper. We didn't want to be left without them, so.
You didn't run out and buy 85 of them per site?
No, we did not. We figured 2 per location was going to be just plenty, especially if we're not coming back in full force.
Sensibility rules, Tina. Thank you.
Christina, we got Frank sent a question to you directly to the host, so we can't all see it.
Oh dear, let me see if I can see it. I did just get a question on the floor from Gabriel. Gabriel, would you like to speak to your question? Gabriel has asked, has there been a conversation at the state level about defining conditional thresholds that would trigger a mandatory level 1 return to shelter in place once school is back in session, understanding that this is largely a county level decision?
So last Tuesday was very light on detail, yet caused a lot of anxiety, I believe unanimous throughout the state of California. And so that is something that we've requested, is really knowing each of the components in the stages. What does that mean? Overnight, we had to, because it was an emergency. Interested in making sure that whatever plans are devised are for the academic year as a whole with contingencies built in versus a stop and go methodology. So it's something that we're still seeking additional feedback, and I think there was a lot of feedback provided to the administration after hearing. Just again, there's more questions than answers, and we're just really proud that in this environment we are actually working very well together with the Department of Education and all of our union colleagues and associations, really making sure that this really is looking at the best interests of your staff and your students and making sure you have the supports needed to return.
Thank you, Sarah. I am seeing no open questions or raised hands at this time.
So thank you so much for your time. We will be providing the slide deck that has resources built into each of the bullets that you see displayed. Please feel free to send me an email at sboches@casbo.gov.org and with the topic header of reopening schools. We know that this is a beginning of this conversation. As we mentioned, we are here to support you and to determine what are those best protocols and practices that we need, as well as the state and federal support to ensure that we can properly relay this undertaking. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.